Today's broadcast of Husson University's Distinguished Speaker Series is brought to you by MMG Insurance, protecting your piece of the world.
Good afternoon. As president, it is a pleasure to welcome you to the 2024-2025 Distinguished Speaker Series. Today, businesses must continually seek to acquire new information and turn that knowledge into strategy. To facilitate this process, Husson University, home of the largest business college in Maine, is pleased to present the Distinguished Business Series Speaker Series sponsored by MMG Insurance. This series, launched in conjunction with the opening of Husson's College of Business building, Harold Alfond Hall, in 2021, has included dynamic speakers from a variety of disciplines, ranging from banking, government and security, to management, marketing, and more. The main objective is to educate students, alumni, and community members on the challenges facing businesses and related professions, as well as to inspire those who will become our future leaders. Today, we welcome Marc Guastella. Marc is a seasoned and results-driven leader with over 20 years' experience in hospitality, gaming, and food and beverage industries. Throughout his career, Marc has demonstrated an exceptional ability to drive operational excellence, cultivate high-performing teams, and deliver strong financial results. His expertise spans casino general management, hotel operations, food and beverage oversight, and personal development. Marc came to Bangor with an extensive experience in hospitality and gaming, including companies such as the Mandarin Oriental Hotels, Peninsula Hotels, MGM Resorts International, the MENA Group, and Penn Entertainment. And currently he serves as Vice President and General Manager at Hollywood Casinos, where he oversees daily property operations, including gaming, food and beverage, and hotel management. Welcome, Marc. We appreciate you joining the Speaker Series today and discussing your leadership opportunities and journey with Dean Hanson.
Marc, it's so nice to have you here.
Pleasure to be here as well.
Yes.
Thank you so much. It's an absolute honor. So.
Well, I'm so glad to welcome you to Bangor, but it's been 6 months now. Is that what I just heard?
It has. It's been 6 months, and it's amazing how time flies.
Yes.
Looking forward to the spring.
Yes.
As you can imagine.
I think we all are at this point.
But no, just thrilled to be in the community, and just being in Bangor in Maine. It's such a beautiful place, and like I said, the community is absolutely awesome, and what a great honor to be here today and to have this conversation with you.
Well, I love to kind of go back in time, so pre-Bangor, of course, and back to where your thoughts about future resided. So we have an audience full of students today, so sometimes it's really nice to talk about the detail of where you started. What was your first job you ever had?
Goodness, it's going back a few years, but my first job was actually cashiering at a pizza place. Okay. I'm originally from South Africa, so born and raised, so that's where the accent's from. I know in the earlier group with the students we were playing a guessing game. I know Australia is usually what comes up first, but
yes.
eventually it's South Africa it was. But Started off there in the service industry doing that, which kind of kicked things off early on in the journey.
Did that say, yes, I'm always going to do hospitality, or what did that mean?
No, not at that point. I think I was at a point in my life where I was still trying to figure out what I was going to do.
Sure.
And I'm sure through the conversation there'll be many references to this, but it's all about taking your opportunities and really embracing feedback and people you meet and things like that leads you in the right direction. At that stage I did that, and my second job after that was actually working in a hotel. And
what did you do in the hotel?
I was actually a server, a busser, and a dishwasher.
Okay.
So that's where everything started.
Yeah.
And had the opportunity to be exposed to the industry and just everything that it goes with. And obviously when you start in a new industry, it's very intimidating.
Sure.
But, really fell in love with it, and just the excitement of it, the dynamic nature of it, and, most importantly, it's the people you meet and what you learn from those people. And I think the common denominator in my career, my journey, has been, learning from everybody, learning from the people you work with, learning from the people that lead you. And that's always been a best practice that I've adopted, and I continue to do it today, and it's very helpful.
For sure. So when you take on some of those first jobs, where were you at age-wise? Were you still in high school?
I had just finished high school. So I finished high school. Again, I was a little lost in what I wanted to do. I did a little bit of traveling.
Okay.
And then, it was shortly after that I started working. It was a hotel by the name of Cape Grace, which is in Cape Town. I was very fortunate to have an opportunity there. Yeah. And it was so inspiring. It's going in and really being open to that. I got to meet great chefs, professionals in the wine and food world, things that I'd never heard existed. And it just to hear people talk about what they do with such passion and enthusiasm, that's what got me really hooked into it. Because I've always been a true believer, even in my school days, coming out of school and to today, is you have to be passionate about what you do, and surrounding yourself with passionate, driven people who you can learn from every day, to me, is inspiring. And it started off right at the beginning of my career, and I think it's a key piece that's helped me grow.
Oh, so that's such a good place to start. What brought you to the States?
What brought me to the United States? Quite a journey. So a little bit about my journey. So obviously in South Africa, I worked there. I then had the opportunity to go to the UK. So also in hotels, that's where I left the hotel I was working on, and I went to Mandarin Oriental Hotel Group.
Okay.
Started off there right in, at the bottom of the organizational chart. I was dishwashing there and I was bussing. That was my first job. This was mid-2000. And it was really the culture there, which was, learning every discipline, learning what people do, understanding and having empathy for even the jobs that are the tougher jobs that you don't see. And I had the opportunity to do that. And I grew. I was there for about 4 years, learned a lot, and eventually I worked myself up to assistant manager of the Michelin star restaurant at the time there at the Mandarin, which was a 2 Michelin star restaurant. Incredibly disciplined and detail-oriented. And it was an incredible learning experience. And really one thing I learned then, again, as I continued to grow and saw people coming into those entry positions, it's all about that empathy and appreciation for what people do. So that was that role. And then I had the opportunity in 2003 to move to the United States. I was originally coming to the US. I was on a visa. I was on a J1 visa. It was 18 months, so came over. I then worked for Peninsula Hotels in Chicago. Very different, coming, like, how did I find myself here?
What was the thing that stood out to you about it being different?
I think just completely, coming from South Africa, going to the UK, there were some similarities culturally. Coming to the United States was just very different. For me, just different ways, different holidays, different sports, different everything. It was really, really something, culturally diverse for me. So I went there, learned a lot at the property, and life changed. I actually met my wife in Chicago. We got married, and the rest is history from that perspective. But what a great opportunity to be there and to learn a different perspective in a new market.
And a big market.
A big market. It really was. And where Chicago is today on the culinary and food and beverage side has continued to grow. But even at that time, it really exposed me to different businesses, different way of thinking. And again, like I said earlier, just being open to that and learning from that has really been great for me.
You mentioned, I'm just going to back up a moment, the Michelin star piece.
Yes.
Maybe just to share with our audience what that ranking means, because it means a lot in the food and beverage industry. So
it does. So for those that don't, so Michelin is the Michelin Guide. Obviously, Michelin tires, the Michelin Guide.
I think that's probably where I would have thought first, right?
And that's where it generates from. So it's a hospitality guide that essentially is there, and it's really the pinnacle, or what everyone wants to strive to. Traditionally, Michelin stars were given out to restaurants predominantly in Europe, where it was originated. And only within the last 20 years or so has it really become a more prevalent force in the United States. And it is a very high accolade. So it's the attention to detail. In my experience there in the UK, it was just the meticulous detail and the passion that people have for their craft. In order to achieve any stars, even if it's 1 out of 3, it's still a massive achievement. 3 is obviously the pinnacle. But that truly was a foundational inspiration for me, because what made it special was the detail and the passion. If people came to work at a restaurant that's a 2 or 3 Michelin star and they weren't passionate, they would never achieve that. And it just shows that kind of X factor that goes into really being a great business leader and achieving something awesome. So that role gave me a lot of insight into discipline, into education, into training people, and really following what you're passionate about. And it was great to set me up for the rest of my career.
So you moved into an assistant manager position while you were in that?
Yes, I was. So that was one of my first leadership roles.
Yeah.
And it was great because it gave me an opportunity really to learn. I had leaders there who at times were quite hard on me, I'm not gonna lie. But again, it was fair, that's the thing. And it was really teaching what discipline is in the industry, but also teaching what is important and how you need to look at the business, follow your passion, and also be self-disciplined. And I think a lot of what I've always followed through my journey is, people have expectations for you as a leader or even starting out, but the expectations that really matter are the expectations you set for yourself. Because the only person who can hold you accountable to that is you. So I feel if you have that really good work ethic and that high standard and you're continuously holding yourself accountable, you're gonna fail. I've failed many times. But that's a mindset that truly sets one up for success and achieves great results.
So you were fairly young in that leadership role too.
I was. My first leadership role, I'm trying to think, I was just going on 21. So
there's some in the audience that are that age.
Yeah,
so think about that for a moment.
It was challenging in the way that actually at that time, all of the team members who I was supervising were my senior.
Yes.
And I've definitely made some mistakes at the beginning as to how I approach situations, but you learn from it. And one of the things I continue to do is, it doesn't matter where people are in their careers that you supervise or work with. It's all about being open to their feedback, listening to them, and learning from their expertise. Because no matter what background somebody comes from, you can always learn something from them. And I truly believe that, the leaders that I look up to are the ones that embrace that and are open to that feedback. And that's what I did earlier on in my career. And it wasn't just all me, it was people around me that gave me that guidance. I chose to listen to it and follow it. Unfortunately, some didn't, but I've always felt that it's great. And all of that guidance I've been given, my goal is always to pay that forward to new students or people starting out their career in business. I feel it's my role, and the right thing to do is pay it forward.
So at a time that maybe you didn't take the advice or you went a different direction, does that resonate in some way for a memory?
There have been times, yes. There have been times where I've been defiant on certain things or maybe approach situations in a way I wouldn't do today.
Do you have an example to share with us?
I think nothing really specific. I think early on my career, I think certain things I felt I knew better. I'm not going to lie. And I very quickly found out I didn't. But I eventually acknowledged that, where someone would have an idea, I would kind of want to do it differently. Sometimes I did it that way and it didn't work. And then it always circled back where it's like, you can have your thought and opinion on something, but listen to the person who's telling you. Firstly, they're taking the time to give you guidance.
Right.
And it's always good to take the advice because, these are seasoned professionals who have gone through what I hadn't yet in my career. So,
Sure.
yeah.
And that is meaningful.
Yeah.
Well, fast forward to Chicago, at some
Yes.
point you left that property.
I did. So left Chicago and moved to Las Vegas.
Okay.
Another big change, as you can
Yes.
imagine.
Yes.
And it's funny, I was saying to the group of students who I was chatting to earlier today, I was like, that was a culture shock.
I'm sure.
Working in a hotel that had 400 rooms in a city like Chicago, going to the Bellagio, Las Vegas, 3,000 rooms, 30 restaurants. At the time they had just shy of 4,000 employees, and that's just one property.
And the great fountains.
And the fountains are just amazing. Yes, yes, they are. For those who haven't seen them, I would highly recommend it. But it was just a huge change. And
Sure.
I think Vegas for me was just understanding scale.
What did you enter as a role when
I
you got
was
there?
I was actually an assistant general manager of a restaurant at the Bellagio. It was a brand new restaurant. I had entered there, and yeah, it was just very different. I mean, the restaurant that I worked in had almost half the amount of team members at the hotel I'd worked before.
Wow.
Your typical high volume restaurant in Vegas has between 100 and 150 team members just in one restaurant.
Right.
So I think the scale of that and, taking what I had learned and saying, now I'm leading a larger team and how do I do that? And that is what was awesome about Vegas. It opened my eyes to just the amount of talent. I don't think a lot of people know how much talent, especially on the hospitality side, there is in Las Vegas. I'm not sure if it still is, but at the time I was there, it was the city with the largest amount of master sommeliers in the world. More Michelin star restaurants than anywhere in the world. And you're experiencing every single level of the hospitality business, from budget to the most high-end hotel suites that are running between $5,000 and $10,000 a night on average. So you get to immerse yourself in this environment. I felt it awesome because it was such a great way to learn from these people. And that's why I truly attribute Las Vegas as one of the pivotal pieces of my growth in the industry. Simply because of what I saw and helped manage through, but also the people that I had the opportunity to work with. And some of the most impactful mentors that I've had in my life were during my tenure there.
That's a great piece to mention, mentors.
Yeah.
What does that mean to you to have a mentor?
So I think mentoring is multifaceted, but I think firstly, a mentor, you have to want to be mentored. I start with that because I've been a mentor and I've been a mentee. But being a mentor, I've mentored people who just don't want to be. It's almost like, I have to go be mentored.
It's a chore.
It is, but it's okay. It's just you got to identify the right fit, but it has to be a symbiotic relationship. But if there's connection and you want to be a sponge, then it's the right thing for you. But the mentors that I have, I think they're people who truly care about the person they're mentoring. On the flip side, if I'm mentoring somebody, I want to also make sure that I want to do it, not that I feel I have to, because then it becomes real. And I truly feel mentors that I've had in my life, they had my best interest at heart. They were fully vested in my growth and development. Even though some conversations I had with said mentors might have not been the most pleasant, and they were quite direct when I made several mistakes growing up, but they did it because they cared.
Sure.
I had one specific mentor who was also my boss, and he was the president at MGM Grand Detroit. Later on in my career, I'm sure you're going to touch on.
Yeah.
But he would push me, and he would push me, and it was tough at times, especially when I saw him call me, and I was like, "What's going on now?" But I'll never forget, he always told me, he goes, Mark, I do this because I care. You have potential. And I'm pushing you so that you can see the potential you have. And he always used this analogy, which was, I'll push you, there's an edge of the mountain or whatever. He's like, as soon as you get there, I will never let you fall off. Never. He's like, as soon as I feel you're going to tip, I'll pull you back. And it was very simple analogy with that, but I remember it today and it always resonates with me because no one would have taken that time if they didn't truly believe in what my abilities were.
And it's interesting where he's speaking up and it's hard to hear.
It is, yeah.
But I do appreciate that you're saying, it needs to be a symbiotic relationship as well. I've had people that have said, oh, I want you to mentor me, but the why.
Correct. That's such a huge piece of it. It's why. What do you want to achieve? And one of the things when I'm mentoring somebody, I ask them, what do you want to get out of me? And sometimes they're not going to know right away, but as long as it's, I want to learn from you and your expertise. But a mentorship to be truly successful is that both parties learn from each other. It doesn't matter if someone's in their first year or their last year. Either party can learn from the other one, sharing a different perspective and putting fresh eyes on a situation, which I think is very valuable.
It's interesting too that you said one of them was your boss, because that's a different type of relationship as a boss to an employee versus mentor to a mentee. How did you distinguish how he was acting at certain times?
I think it was very clearly defined. I think he did a really good job of defining it that way. And I appreciated that. I've had several other mentors as well, where mentor, the way I look at it is a mentor doesn't necessarily have to be somebody who is, here's your mentor, you're meeting at 1 o'clock on Tuesday, for example. A mentor is just somebody who you're around who is in your corner. When things go south, they give you advice. When things go well, they call you and give you encouragement. And it's identifying who these mentors are. I've got mentors who I look up to and I've learned from who I've never worked with before, ever. But I meet them at leadership conferences. I ask questions and they give me the time to actually answer them. And I always find that impactful because if someone's really busy and they take the time to answer a question and help you with something, that shows they're vested. And it's these pieces of mentoring that you experience throughout your life and you bring them all together. I think that is also something very, very impactful.
Circling back around to teams for a moment, because you've worked with so many different sizes of teams. The most recent one we were talking about was Vegas. What do you like better? Small team, large team? What works for you?
I think for me, it doesn't really matter the size of the team. I've worked with both. There's pros and cons to both. But I think at the end of the day, it's the way you lead teams is the same, whether it's a team of 10 or a team of 100. And the way I look at it is very simplistic, which is you have to engage with your team. You have to build trust. And you build trust through action and following through. And that's always been something I've been very passionate about. And you also, with a team, I've always believed in this, it's expectations are the number one driver of performance. So if you're setting clear expectations, you're holding your team and yourself accountable to the same expectations, then you have buy-in. And when that happens, it becomes very powerful. The team is open with you, they will share concerns with you, they will share feedback with you, and that creates synergy. And I felt that approach, again, going back to your original question, whether it's a smaller team or a larger team, the same process needs to happen. It's just a matter of making sure that cascades through all layers of the organization.
So have you had the opportunity where a team has not played well together, so to
100%,
speak?
yes.
Okay. And
many times.
Yes, and I'm sure all of us can think of those pieces. What do you do when that happens?
Well, I think firstly, if there's a team that's not functioning, you really need to understand what the root cause is, the why. A lot of the times it's looked at on the surface, but it's what is the root cause and then start from there. So, is it a training thing? Is it a communication thing? Is it somebody who's not vested? Is it somebody on the team who's causing an environment that isn't adhering to what those expectations are? And then really dealing with that and taking the time to. I think a lot of times teams might be off the rails a little bit and need to be brought back in line, but whoever's leading them maybe doesn't want to address it, because those are hard conversations to have, especially when it's performance-based or a leader of a team you need to hold accountable. So I truly feel as good leaders, business owners, et cetera, hard conversations are what is needed. As I mentioned earlier, hard conversations were had with me when I was starting out, and they still happen, trust me. But they have to happen, because if you don't address it as a business owner or business leader, unfortunately, teams will continue to slide in the direction opposite to what you wanted to. In my experience, you're never going to get the perfect team, but again, I think I've done things that have worked, I've done things that haven't worked, but it's all part of that learning curve. But yes, team dynamics, you could put the perfect plan in place and it still doesn't work. It's not a self-reflection. Sometimes things don't work out and you need to think of other ways to pivot. That's perfectly fine and part of operating a business.
Well, certainly change is a part of all of this.
Oh, yes.
For both your journey in work and then just in general. Let's see, we left off in Vegas. Where did you go after that?
Yeah, so after Vegas, I was there for almost 6 years.
Okay.
Vegas was a lot, started my career, got married there, both my kids were born there, so a lot of impact in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
So from there, we moved to Toledo, Ohio. A little bit of a difference.
Sounds different.
Just slightly.
Yeah.
Moved from Vegas to Toledo in early December of 2011. So that was quite a change. But that was my first time working for Penn Entertainment.
Okay.
Penn National Gaming at the time.
And just to clarify for the audience, that's now who you're
Yes,
also
I'm sorry,
working for too, right?
Yes, I work. Penn Entertainment is our overall company.
Sure.
A little bit about Penn. It's a huge domestic gaming operator. We operate 44 casinos in 20 jurisdictions. We have both bricks and mortar and online presence, and then we also have international presence in Ontario with online casino. So it's a huge entity. So yes, that's the company. Sorry, I should have led with that.
No, that's great. And so Ohio was your first stop.
It was. So different and changing career. When I was in Vegas, it was all about high-end restaurants, high-end facilities, heavy volume. But I wanted to pivot. My goal was, how could I become a GM of a casino? What is another path that I could take? And even though I went from food and beverage to food and beverage, and I was mentioning this to the group earlier, very different. Just how, because when you're food and beverage within a casino entity that's regional versus Vegas, it's very different. To put it into perspective, in a Las Vegas casino, if you take the entire revenue of the casino, it's about 70% non-gaming and only 30% gaming. A lot of people don't realize that. They think the casino is the main revenue driver, but it isn't. If you take a regional market, like the ones I've worked in, it's flipped. It's usually 80% gaming and 20% food and beverage.
Okay.
So food and beverage essentially is more of a support to the casino revenues to provide food and beverage options for customers rather than a destination. That is changing significantly now, just with regional markets. There's even the new properties we're opening up, et cetera, we're bringing in new brands, third parties, so really lifting that, which is absolutely fantastic. So again, I know you mentioned going to Ohio. That was different because I wanted to learn that piece of the puzzle. And I did. And it also exposed me, because it was a smaller casino, being regional, I had exposure to gaming leaders, marketing leaders, and others that in a smaller organization or hotel I would never have had happen.
I was going to say there's a lot behind the scenes that we may not realize for functions.
Exactly.
And you've mentioned the gaming side, but the marketing, there's
It's
HR,
huge.
there's finance, IT, there's so many different areas that we have here at Husson that students could be looking at.
100%. And I say that to anyone who's looking to come into the casino business. It is multifaceted. You can be an engineer or a table games dealer or a marketing head. So it is a huge umbrella of opportunity for anyone who's looking to come in. So that was the experience there, and it really gave me an opportunity to learn a different side of the business. And I got really, really excited about that. And it was a great opportunity. Also opening the casino from the ground up,
yes.
hiring staff, setting precedent, building training manuals and all that stuff that is endless hours,
Yes.
but very rewarding and very fulfilling.
And what made you decide to leave Ohio?
So it was for an opportunity. At the time, I had been with MGM, as I mentioned before, and I had worked in capacity when I was in Vegas with Mina Group. We had a couple of restaurants at MGM Grand Detroit, and the gentleman who I mentioned earlier, he called me and was like, "We've got this opportunity for VP of non-gaming." I was sad to leave Penn at the time, but you have this gut feeling like it's the right thing to do. So I went from director of food and beverage to VP of non-gaming, as I mentioned. And that was a huge role. To put into perspective, it was suddenly I had hotel, spa operations, banquet sales. My first meeting with the spa team was very interesting because I didn't understand what they were talking about. So I had to do a lot of reading. But it all boiled down to leadership. It doesn't matter what you're doing, it's about leading people. And I felt that I was in a good place and they trusted me to do that. And again, those 4 years that I was there was huge. To broaden my experience, at the time I had about 1,200 people under my vertical from an employee perspective. So it was challenging. Probably, I would say that was probably the most challenging first year of any job I've ever had. But it was the one that probably taught me the most.
And I appreciate what you just said, that you had to ask questions and
Yes.
listen to what they were doing, yet you didn't have to be the expert in their areas.
Absolutely, and it's a great point because I can even, and again, not jumping the gun to my previous role, but when I moved from, when I started my role in Grantville, I was the assistant general manager of Hollywood Casino at Penn National Racecourse. I've been a food and beverage person, non-gaming, and then suddenly, like that, I find myself in meetings with table games personnel and slots personnel. And it's the subject matter we're talking about is very foreign to me.
Sure.
Haven't done it. But to your point, it's all about leading. And when people ask me, Mark, what do? You're the general manager, but like what area? I simplify it by saying this, is my role is to create an environment and a culture where the experts of the areas can do what they do to the best of their ability.
Absolutely.
So infrastructurally, development, support, coaching, mentoring, hiring the right people, making sure that people are held accountable to a positive culture. Those are the things that work. And it's trust in your team. It's asking questions, it's learning. And one of the things I felt so impactful is coming into a property or a business where your position is higher as a VP, and I go to someone who's an entry-level manager, and I say to them, can we sit together because I want to learn from you how you do your job. It's firstly, they're like, what is he asking me? Is this a trick?
And I'm like, trouble?
No. But it's not, and that's always been my way of running the business, is
Sure.
You learn from those people, and they get so excited to tell you because it's genuine. There's been times in my life where, and it still happens, where I would call someone up to my office and be like, hey, can you meet me up in my office? And they come in, and usually I hear, am I going to get fired? Like, no, I just want to have a conversation with you. So I've really tried to break that mold of, yes, I might be the VP or the leader of the business, but we're a team together.
Right.
Something I've always said to the team is this: we all have different titles, we all have different business cards, but at the end of the day, every single person is equally as important to the organization. And I would, if I don't show up tomorrow, the business will still run. But guess what? If the dishwashers don't show up, if the servers don't show up, if the IT personnel don't show up, we will have to close the business. So I'd argue their positions are more important than mine. But it's understanding to the team that we're all in this together. It's not a matter of just because certain someone's in a role that it's okay for them to behave in a certain way. It's all about that embrace of the team. And to that initial question about how do I approach things or subjects I don't know, it's broadcasting that. And I've always felt once the team trusts my intentions, things usually go very, very well, and the team moves in the right direction.
Well, that takes patience to create that culture you're describing, though, too.
It does. I've had to learn patience. I'm telling you good things that have happened, but there have been a lot of bumps along the way, especially being patient. One of the other great pieces of advice I was given in my life was I would sit in a room, and this was with another leader, and I walked in and I was like, I'm so frustrated. He asked, why? I'm like, you know what, they don't know how to do this, and why aren't they doing this? You know, if I did this, it would just be so obvious to me that this needs to be done. And the advice that was given to me was, well, Mark, not everyone's you. Everyone works differently. If you assume that somebody else should know something, then you've failed before you've even started. You need to understand what they understand.
Right.
And that also is something that stuck with me, is looking at it through the lens of what does the team need, not only what my expectations are of them.
It comes from asking questions, but
Yes.
sometimes they don't know what's needed as well.
Precisely.
And so how you have those conversations, it sounds like, is important too.
It's very important, and it's just, again, it's I mentioned it a lot, it's all about building trust. And again, trust, you can't, even in a role of a GM coming into a business, just coming in it's not good enough. You have to.
You can't just say, hi, I'm the GM,
no,
accept me.
Exactly.
Right.
You have to go and truly show the team that you're there for them. And that's part of servant leadership. And again, I think it's also attributed to the organizations that I've worked for in my life that have been very detail-oriented and very much servant leadership. As leaders, we are here to serve our teams. And I feel very, very blessed to have had the opportunity to be around leaders who taught me that very early on in my career. So.
Absolutely. From that servant leadership, you've obviously continued to carry that today.
Yeah.
You left Penn, though, again.
I did leave, I was with
you've left MGM twice. You've
It's
left
been a
Penn
bit of a
twice.
ping pong,
I'm
yeah.
like, I try.
I'm sorry. So I was in Ohio, then I went to Detroit for the 4 years.
Right.
Then I went back to Las Vegas, actually. So I did two stints in Las Vegas. The second time, it was a great opportunity. Went there, still with MGM Resorts. It was with Monte Carlo Hotel and Casino. They were going through a huge transition between Monte Carlo and Park MGM, which is currently now. So for those who have been to Las Vegas, where Park MGM sits, that used to be Monte Carlo. Huge, it was a massive cultural shift because it was a property that was a core property within the company's portfolio, and they were migrating to a luxury property. So it was one of the biggest tests I had for changing culture. You know, taking someone who had been doing a certain job in one way for 20 years, how they're gonna do it in a new way with a new customer. So that was intense. I'm not gonna lie, that was very intense. But a huge learning experience there during that time. And I did that role till right after the opening of that. It was around April, May of 2019. And then had the opportunity to come back with Penn. So it was MGM Penn, MGM Penn.
Well, and I do appreciate, I never heard a bridge being burned during these times. And you're calling these opportunities. And so how do you leave one to go to another?
It's a great point. I'm so glad you asked that, because I think for anyone starting out in business, whether it's your first day or your last or at any time in the middle, maintaining relationships is the cornerstone of everything. And I have many examples in my life, and how it applies to this, and then I'll kind of go into it, is when I left Hollywood Toledo, our senior vice president of regional operations at the time, he and I had a good relationship. He came from a hotel, food and beverage background, so did I, so we hit it off really well. And I'll never forget my last day. He goes, Mark, I'm really mad. He had other words, but he was like, I'm really mad that you're leaving.
Of course.
But at any time, if you change your mind and come to your senses, just call me again. But he's like, I understand why you're doing this.
Sure.
And that was huge. So I went on my way. I left Penn at the time in 2013, and then I came back in 2019. So 2019, it was a strange time for me because MGM went through a large restructure. I was involved in that restructure. There were about 1,500 people who unfortunately were, positions were changed and eliminated, and I was one of them. And that happens in your career sometimes. So, been on a good trajectory, that was a reality check. I was like, oh my goodness, it's the first time in my life I have not had a job.
And does that, the word failure comes to mind
All
for
the time.
people when they're going through something like that, but that was out of your control. That was something that happened to you.
It was. And, initially you self-reflect and you take a pause and you're like, goodness, what just happened? But I say this emphatically. It was the best thing that ever happened in my career, hands down, because it gave me an opportunity to truly think about what I wanted to do. It gave me an opportunity to reflect on who I wanted to work for. And during that transition that I was referencing, the gentleman who I referred to, was right in that middle period. So this was late April, early May.
So you told him you came to your senses?
Yeah, I did. But I contacted him, his name was John, and I said, John, listen, this happened. He's like, yeah, I've heard about it. Mark, did you get it? I'm like, yeah. He's like, it was the head recruiter at the time. He goes, meet so-and-so at the Tropicana tomorrow at 9 o'clock. And it was like 6 in the evening. I'm like, you sure? He's like, yes. Went there, met with her, met with a few people, and I within a week I was offered the role as assistant general manager of Hollywood P&RC. So if that never happened, I would not be here today. There's no way. And what that taught me was impressions you make on people and not burning bridges. Always leave in good stead. Whether the person, if your boss you don't like or you don't get on with, that's okay, but always make sure to leave in a good place, because you never know when you're going to need those people again. And I use that example as a pivotal example, because if I didn't build and work hard on those relationships with my team and with certain people, I would never have had the opportunity to be where I am today and to affect positive change in a professional sense that I do today. So,
and I think that's huge for everyone that's in the audience. When maybe we used to think about jobs being, this is where I'm going to work forever, versus there may be stepping stones along the way. And what a great lesson that relationship came back. We may say we'll never see them again, but the world is small.
The world is very small. And one example I always use is, particularly when I was in Vegas and we were looking for a manager or a position. And I'll never forget, we would look at the resumes, and every time there was a position, you would see the same resumes come through. And I would look at the resume and I'd be like, wow, this person has an amazing resume. But all it takes is one phone call. And it'll be like, why did you work with? Oh, well, this person did this and that and the other. Now, it doesn't mean that person is never going to find a role again. It just makes it a lot more difficult. And the common denominator is they had found another job. They weren't committed till the last minute. They said some disrespectful things or inappropriate things to people who they work with, knowing that they're on their last few days at the company. It's important, no matter what you do, no matter how happy or unhappy you are. If you're unhappy in a role and you need to leave, firstly, that's a good thing, because you never want to work where you're not happy. But when you recognize you're not, leave as if you were happy and see your time out, because again, you never know where those bridges are going to cross again.
It's such an interesting piece, because then you ended up back with Hollywood.
I did.
And so here, but before you got to Bangor, there was Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania. So came there as the assistant general manager, which was it's a great role that Penn has as well, to prep new leaders to become general managers. That was where I was during the pandemic. Very surreal experience. Casino was shut down. One of the days I'll never forget, it was just me and someone in surveillance for the whole property. And I walked out the porte-cochere of the property, and there were two bears just walking through. I was like, well, this is what happens when humans go away. But we navigated through that. And I think as leaders, for I'm sure everyone here has been or heard of other leaders who have been part of the pandemic, who weren't furloughed, who were there. It was a challenge of patience, resilience, emotions. It was tough. Dealing with having to, for people to, they would have to be let go, then you would have to bring them back.
Just that unknown.
So unknown, and it was a lot of mental stress. I think that period, unlike everybody else, it was a very challenging time. But I've always been one to say, look, even in a terrible situation like COVID, what positives were taken out of it? And I think that as leaders, businesses, I know for me and our business, we look at the business very differently to what we did in 2019.
Sure.
How we hire people, how we run the business, our efficiencies. It's given us perspective as to what we were doing before and questioning, why did we ever do that? So sometimes it takes forced change to change perspective on how we run our business. And as challenging and devastating as that was, I think that now, retrospectively, I think those leaders who managed through that are more resilient, more patient, and just better leaders than what they were prior.
You mentioned the word resilience,
Yeah.
and I always like to touch on that. When you think of that word, what does that mean for you as an individual to be resilient?
I think for me, it's multifaceted. I think firstly, it's sticking to your plan. If you've got an objective that you need to meet, there are going to be hurdles, millions of them, between where you are now and your goal. You have to be ready to overcome that. Some will be easier, some will be not so easy. But resilience is getting through it in various different ways and challenging yourself to think differently to overcome said obstacle. Unfortunately, times have shown that sometimes resilience people aren't as resilient as others. There are people who are more resilient than me. But I felt that that's one piece. And number two, like we had chatted about earlier, it's that self-discipline. Self-discipline is resilience. It's when it's the most challenging, it's getting up and doing what you should be. The most quintessential example was the following step in my career after being AGM at Granville, saw the pandemic through. And during that time, there were 2 more casinos opening in Pennsylvania, one in York and one in Morgantown. They were category 4s. It was just a license that they had in the bill to expand retail gaming in Pennsylvania. So when I was AGM at Granville, I was promoted then to the general manager of Hollywood Casino Morgantown. But that property opened up in December of 2021, which was still in the middle of the Omicron variant, if I remember correctly. And it was
clearly that made a mark on you.
It made a mark. I remember it clearly. But it was brutal. I think that was the most resilient I'd ever had to be in my life, because you're opening up a casino. Firstly, to hire people was almost impossible. To keep the team motivated, everyone was getting sick. At one point in time, we had just about 30% of our workforce 2 weeks before opening that was sick. They couldn't work.
My goodness.
Opening up, the first day we opened up the property, the second day I had to close one of our restaurants that we had been pushing through marketing for months. We had to shut it down for a month. Wow. So there's a lot of self-reflection. You look at yourself and you go, my goodness, is it me?
Yep.
Am I failing?
Sure.
The reality checks. There were long drives home just staring out the windshield with no music on, just questioning my life. But that was the resilience, because every morning I got up and I said, as long as today is slightly better than yesterday, that's what I gained on. Whereas today might not be perfect, but we're going to take one aspect from yesterday and improve it, and then do the same thing the next, and the same thing the next. And I had to do that in my role, and we got through it. I mean, yes, there were battle wounds, for sure, but that really made me more patient and more resilient. And one of the key things that I heard was, I know you mentioned I work for Mina Group. The chef of Mina Group is Chef Michael Mina, and he would say to all of his teams all the time was, no 2 days are the same. Tomorrow is never going to be the same as today. It's either going to be better or it's going to be worse. That's it. It's as simple as that. It's like you're either going to be better or worse than what you were yesterday. Focus on being better. It doesn't matter if it's one fraction better, as long as you were better. And I think that's resilience. It's grinding through things, and it's challenging yourself to overcome things. Because I can assure you, if you get to the other side of it, you're automatically a stronger, more effective leader.
So what I love about your definition, we sometimes hear resilience is the ability to bounce back. Well, I actually hear you going forward,
yes,
as opposed to just getting back to where you were.
That's right. It's going forward, and it's also bouncing back to a degree, but I think it's it's continuing when others don't. It's keeping the ship rowing. It's when, if you're a leader in business, it's the people that are around you who are ready to throw in the towel, and you sit with them and you have a culture to say, stick with it, we're gonna get there. Some people unfortunately don't stick with it, the majority do, and the relationships and bond and trust you build with those people who go through that kind of war together is huge. And I think that is, for me, it's been very impactful. And again, going back to the people I've worked with, because it's the influence you get, especially opening up restaurants. Incredibly resilient team, long hours, a lot of work to do. It's a grind. You know, when you leave a restaurant at 2 o'clock in the morning and you take a bus home, get home at 3, and then you're back up at 8:30 for a 9 o'clock morning briefing to plan out the next 16 hours, and you're running on fumes. Yes, it's not ideal, and I'm not promoting that kind of work environment, just to be clear. But those are sometimes things you have to do to learn the business. No matter where you are in the business, there's going to be times where there are going to be long hours. There are going to be tough tasks. But in order to be a leader down the road and to really be successful, you have to go through that, because you have to, like we were saying at the beginning, understand what your team's going through.
Yes.
Right now, if it's a busy New Year's Day this year, for example, we had a crazy busy day. It was busy. The team did an amazing job. But I made it a point, you go back to the dish pit and the dishwasher's there and he's been washing dishes for 8 hours, and it's just, and I'm like, hey, let me help you out for half an hour. So I get behind there, put on an apron, and I start washing dishes with him. It's 30 minutes that is just like, wow, this is amazing, right? So that's where the team goes, okay, I'm overcoming obstacles and I have to be resilient. But if my leader is also practicing that, then I'm gonna do that. It's all part of just that human nature of leading by example, which is truly a key component to success.
Well, let's wrap to Bangor now.
Yeah.
How are things going here?
Oh, very well.
Yes, yes.
Great to be in Bangor. I was saying to so many people, it's such a great community. It's beautiful. I got here around Labor Day and squeezed in as much of hiking and exploring as possible before the winter.
It was,
Before it's just shoveling all the time, but a great place. And the casino itself, Hollywood Casino, has got an incredible history. We're actually celebrating our 20-year anniversary this year.
Oh my gosh, how
That's when Hollywood Slots originally opened.
Wow.
The existing building we're in is going on 17 years this summer. It opened up in 2008. Still crazy to think 2008 was 17 years ago.
Yes.
But a great property. The team over there is exceptional. We have leaders and team members there who have been there since day one. And it's one of the best teams I've ever worked with. They're passionate, they're dedicated, and they're just absolutely amazing. So I couldn't be happier to be a part of the team.
That's awesome.
As far as the property's going, we've got a great year ahead of us. We're bringing back some really cool things that hadn't come back since pre-COVID. And we're trying different things from a business perspective. We opened up a new venue, food and beverage-wise, new games on the floor. We've reintroduced live entertainment.
Which I told you I appreciated the dueling piano,
Oh,
so
yes.
I will call that out.
Dueling pianos, they're not going anywhere.
Yeah,
Don't
good,
worry.
good,
So
good.
they'll still be there. And we've extended our hours. This year as well, we've strengthened our partnership with the Waterfront Concert Series. Yes. So we have so much going on. We're excited for the summer months, but it's all about awareness. But the property itself is great, and to have the opportunity to lead such a wonderful team. And then the other part of it is the community impact as well. We're absolutely committed, because for any business to truly succeed, you also have to be completely vested in the community in which you operate. And we're committed to that through philanthropic efforts, through volunteering, all of these things. It's a pivotal part about what we do, and it makes it very fulfilling.
Well, I know you have some interns that you've taken from Husson, so we
Yes,
certainly
we do.
appreciate that.
Excited to have them come on board.
And employees that are working there. But
Yes.
as we're closing in on our hour, I do want to ask the audience, are there any questions that you have for Marc, and based on his experience as a leader, or anything else that you can think of? Yes, sir.
Go ahead. Yeah.
So the question is
question.
about the opportunities. Did they come to you, or were you asking for them?
Yep, great question. I think it's a bit of both, but for me personally, it was the best opportunities I get they were more presented. And I think that comes along the lines of building relationships. Particularly when I was in Las Vegas, my first role there at the Bellagio, I admit my boss there was professional acquaintance with someone from MENA Group, as you mentioned. They put me in touch, interviewed me, and then I moved up. So were there opportunities like this position here in Bangor, for example? I showed interest in it, and I was like, this would be something, but it was still within the company, but I had to show intent, and the company was grateful of my ability that they thought I could do the role. But I think, to expand on your question, I think it's opening yourself up to both. And again, we chatted about this earlier. There are doors that are going to be opened. Be aware of those doors. If somebody said to me 10 years ago, Mark, you'll be running a casino in Bangor, Maine, first I'll be like, what, running a casino? That's not my goal. And right. Bangor, Maine, where is that? I've only seen it on a map flying across the US.
Yes.
But I'm here because I looked into opportunities that I otherwise wouldn't have. So I'm always, to anyone I talk to, I say, be aware of those opportunities. Some you'll take, some you'll don't. There might be a parallel universe where I entered another door and something else would have happened. But I think it's just being aware of it and being open to it. And even if it's something right now you might not be interested in or might not be vested, I would still urge to listen to it, because down the road it might be something you want to do, and that could enhance your life and your career.
Great question.
Great question.
On here.
Hi, how are you?
Hey, Erin.
Okay.
Thank you so much for coming out. I really liked what you said about that you went on New Year's Day to help out your staff doing absolutely anything you could.
Yeah.
And we learned a lot in school. I'm in the hospitality program.
Yeah, absolutely.
But what does servant leadership mean to you, and how is that reflected from your staff?
So what does servant leadership mean to
Absolutely.
you, and how it's reflected?
So I think servant leadership it's prioritizing your team. I think that's where it all comes down to. We chatted a bit about it earlier, which was, I had been posed the question, Mark, how do you find time for your team if you're busy all the time? And my question is, well, being busy is how you prioritize. And if you say to yourself, well, your team in servant leadership, I'm there for them, then they need to be at the top of the list. So if I've got 10 tasks that I need to finish, that I need to complete today, one of those tasks has to be connecting with my team. Otherwise, I can achieve 100 tasks, but if task number 101 is team and it doesn't make my list, then I haven't done my job. So that is what's very important. And the other piece of servant leadership is that the team knows that you're following through on what you say. If I tell them I'm there for them and I'm not, then that's going to be a big dissatisfier. So the critical part of servant leadership is delivering on your promise. If you tell the team you're going to address something, do it. Under promise and over deliver. And it's just showing them through action. And like I said earlier, leadership is not through title or position, it's through action. And if you're following through in actions, the team is going to see it, to the second part of your question. And they're going to say, you know what, he's not just lip service, he's actually following through. And then people mimic that behavior. And then what happens is other leaders do it, and then it creates a culture of servant leadership, which everybody follows. And that's always been my intention. And again, I've worked with so many amazing servant leaders that I've learned from. I wouldn't know it unless I had learned from them. And again, like I said earlier, and I'll say it many times again, it's all about paying that forward to the next generation of leaders coming up. So,
I love
great
that,
question.
because that's really an important piece for anybody to learn from
Yep.
at any point.
Yep.
I want to close with something about learning,
Yeah, absolutely.
because we talked a lot about your career and learning on the job, et cetera. From a traditional education piece,
Yes.
you've had a different track,
I have.
and do you want to just at least put in your little pitch about where you hope to be with
Yes.
that?
So for me, I never came up through a traditional educational track. Right now, I'm actually doing my bachelor's online, and I have intention to get my MBA. That is
At
my
Husson.
at Husson. Yeah, that one definitely. but that is my goal. Is yeah, absolutely. And just again, just the business school here in Husson is just, I've had a chance to meet so many leaders of Husson and this is such an incredible facility, and what you do is truly amazing. And I would be honored to be a part of it.
Thank you.
But yeah, it's what I think that the key point of this is that there's no right or wrong track. It's what you want to do. I think early in my career I didn't know, and I learned so many things. But whether you're going to further your education now or earlier or even later in life, it's whenever you feel is the right time. For me, it's the right time now. And you know, it's whether you get the education first, then the experience, or the experience first, then the education. It's all about how it all comes together. And again, you know, you learn from a formal education perspective, but also be open to learning every day. I have learned something every single day. And if I extrapolate that over 25 years, that's a lot of learning. A lot of learning. But it's always been my goal personally to get that degree as well and to further my formal education. I just happen to do it later on in my career. That's all. So there's no perfect path. Everyone is individual.
Right.
It's just what's right for you. And that's important.
Well, Marc, I want to thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for this opportunity to hear about your journey. I know the students may continue to have some questions after, so we'll connect with them. But I look forward to having you on campus at some point
That would
with
be
your
awesome.
education journey, and thank you for your partnership
Thank
as
you
well.
so much as well. It's my honor to be here today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
MMG Insurance is a proud sponsor of today's broadcast of Husson University's Distinguished Speaker Series. MMG Insurance, protecting your piece of the world.